Good morning, all. We will, sorry for the late start, but we will call the June meeting of the California First Responders Network Board to order. First order of business is roll call. So Sheriff Jim Maley.
Here.
Barry Frazier.
Present.
Bill Hartley.
Here.
Cynthia Gomez. Or Heather Hostler.
Heather Hostler here.
Chief Kevin Guerrero.
Present.
Chief Scott Howland.
Present.
Scott Edson.
Here.
Jeff Hunter. Or Tom Bruce. Tony Tavares. Or Fred Milanes. Chief Trutanich.
Here.
Thought you were. Adelina Zendejas.
Here.
And myself, Patrick Mallon. So we do have a quorum. First order of business is we'll do some introductions. First off, I would like to introduce Chief Deputy Grace Coate, who's from Cal OES, sitting in the back. I would also like to introduce Brian Hobson from FirstNet, who's sitting at the table over here. David Faulkner from FirstNet, Adam Geisler from FirstNet, and Barb Wynn, who's in the audience from AT&T. With those introductions, we'll call for a motion to approve the April 2017 board meeting minutes. Are there any corrections? Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Motion by Barry Frazier. Is there a second?
Second.
By Scott Edson. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, first order of business is a CalFRN FirstNet Outreach. For those of you, I'm sure most of you are aware, we have received the draft state plan from FirstNet and AT&T. We are in the process of reviewing that. As part of that process, we will be conducting a number of outreach meetings across the state to share the information, from that proposal with our constituents, and from the feedback that we get from that, we will be providing that back to FirstNet and AT&T. Their plan right now is to have the comments back by August the 3rd, with 45 days following for them to incorporate our comments, with a release of the final state plan in the mid to late September timeframe, which would then trigger the 90-day option or time for the governor to make a decision on opt-out. So we would like to run the board through at least the Cal OES portion of that outreach presentation, and we would certainly solicit your comments, your input, your valuable input into that process. So with that, I'll turn it over to Budge Courier, who is our 911 branch manager. He's also over the FirstNet effort and team. And Budge, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Pat. So you have a copy of the presentation in your binder. It's also on the screen in front of you. Again, the intent here is to solicit your feedback on the content of this presentation, specifically looking for any gaps that you might think that your stakeholders that you represent would like to see in this. Specifically, what we're trying to do is solicit their feedback on the plan. Many of them may not have access to the state, to the secure portal, so they'll be restricted in just the public version of that portal. So we've tried to provide a mechanism for them to give feedback to the plan, even though they don't have full access to the portal. So just kind of keep that in mind as a background. I'm going to go through the slides at a fairly high level to just give you an overview of our intent and kind of the vision. Our first meeting is on Monday in Fresno, this coming Monday. So your feedback on the content it would have to be quite timely in order for us to adjust the contents of the slides, which we're definitely willing to do. So the purpose of these meetings is to really gain an understanding of the FirstNet and the proposed state plan for California, and also to receive feedback from the stakeholders. We've got 9 different meetings scheduled. You'll see those locations as we go through the presentation. And really, we're out there to try and get feedback on the plan that's presented to us. This is a general overview of the meeting agenda. Some of the meetings do start at 9 in the morning, so they're a 3-hour block, so you could just change this to a morning schedule, and that's what it would look like. So we'll do welcome and introductions. We'll give FirstNet an opportunity to provide an overview from their perspective. Then we'll talk about the role of CalOES. We'll go into a little break, and then we'll give about an hour for AT&T to present their plan and what it looks like. Then we'll have a question and answer period, and then in the end, we'll follow up with next steps on what we're hoping to achieve after the meeting is concluded. And then we'll adjourn the meetings. I don't know, Paul, we might have a next slide, if you would. So, did you skip a couple, or? All right, so the FirstNet update, we're going to give we'll allow FirstNet to give a brief update on what kind of their perspective. They're here today. We want you to see how you fit in the flow so you can start to think about the content of these slides, provide those to us, and we'll incorporate it in the presentation. The next piece will be the role of CalOES. So if you go to the next slide, and then the next one, we're going to talk about our governance structure, what we've got in place to accept the comments and feedback. Most of the folks in this room are probably pretty familiar with that governance structure. We're assuming most of the people we interact with out there will not and be that familiar. So we're going to provide an overview there. And we'll talk about the state plan review and our priorities as we know them today. So next slide. So our governance structure, this chart was put together for us. It kind of shows our outreach plan and the governance bodies that exist throughout the state and how they all work together. We've tried to include all of the different pieces that we've been reaching out to as we message these outreach meetings, to include the CalSeek and the 911 Advisory Board, the CalFRN Board, and everything else that you see on this chart. If there's something missing, a key organization that you'd like to see represented on there, let us know. This is obviously a large effort. We're a large state. We have a huge number of agencies. And so this, really, if we were to represent everything, this would fill about 15 slides. So we're trying to summarize it. The next slide really talks about some of the history and how we got to where we are today. The important thing is that we're in this state plan review phase, and so that's what we're going to focus the majority of this effort on. So we'll run through a little bit of the background here. Next slide. This talks about the governance structure that's in place. So you see CalOES there, you see the CalFRN Board, you see the SPOC, and you see the CalFRN Advisory Committee. So we're really looking for the folks on the CalFRN Board and the CalFRN Advisory Committee to do a deep dive into that plan and help us identify gaps that are there. The folks that we're talking to when we're at these meetings, they'll be the stakeholders. So they're going to be down there at the bottom, the public safety stakeholders. And what we're hoping to get from them is to validate the information that's being fed to us from the CalFRN, from the CalFRN Advisory Committee, and from the information we gleaned from the RFI that we released, and all the discussions we've had up to this point to identify the priorities for this plan for California. So that's how the governance is structured. What we will do in CalOES is we'll take the comments that are received from the CalFRN Board, from the Advisory Committee, and from all the stakeholders. We'll put all those together. We will prioritize them based on what they have told us is most important, and we'll track that data. And we'll consolidate all that within this 45-day period, and we'll send it off to FirstNet. So that's kind of how this governance structure will be put into action. Next slide. We're going to talk a little bit about the state plan review process. So if you go to the next slide, it has the dates and timelines there. We had a meeting on June 7th and 8th in Dallas, Texas, where they provided an overview of this process. As a result of that, we developed the outreach plan that I'm discussing with you today. On the 19th, we were delivered the state plan, at least the initial plan, and we've got until August 4th to get all of our comments back to FirstNet. So we got to remember that we have to include in there the time it's going to take my team to consolidate those comments. So really we're looking at about 30 days that we'd like to see everything back from our stakeholders if we have time, are going to have the time we need to process them. And then from there, as Pat mentioned, AT&T and FirstNet will have 45 days to make updates to that plan, and then sometime mid to late September, they'll deliver the actual state plan for the governor's decision. The next couple of slides, what we do is we start talking about the priorities as we know them today. So if you click about 2 slides forward, Paul, you'll see we go to priorities, and then the next slide is kind of busy. We understand that. But this is a consolidated list of the priorities that we've received in no particular order. So they aren't in order of priority or anything else. This is what we've heard is from all of our stakeholders up to this point of what they say is important. So what we've tried to do to make this more digestible, because this is kind of a little intimidating looking at a list like this. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see we've broken them down into major areas. The first area is coverage. And so around the outside of that bubble, you see all the various aspects of coverage. Some may be important, more important to some stakeholders than others. Obviously, if you're an inland county, coverage along the coast may not be a high priority for you, those kind of things. So what we're going to do in our feedback form is provide them an opportunity to tell us their top priorities. Of all these different categories that we've identified, we hope to hear from them what their top priorities are. And then just based on sheer numbers, we'll come up with some type of metric so that we can see statewide what's the most important thing that needs to be addressed. We'll provide that data to FirstNet and AT&T so you can prioritize your response. And then rest assured, when we get that next plan back, we will check that to see if you've addressed those priorities, especially the critical ones. The next bubble talks about network, and you can see the various components of that. And then finally, well, there's quite a few bubbles on here that I'm sure are important to folks. And then the last one is cost and services. So with these categories, if there's something you think that's missing, please let us know. We expect, the form that we're soliciting their feedback through allows them to give us comments basically on anything. But we're trying to figure out a way, if we get, say, 1,000 or 2,000 comments, whatever they are, we'd like to have a way to categorize them, prioritize them, and sift through them so we can make sure that we highlight what's really important. And that's really one of the major efforts, is trying to organize the data we receive in such a way that we can bring it back to this board and say, here's what we heard out there. These are what we think are the highest priority. And so that's how all this is structured. The next slide talks about how they're going to provide the feedback. Those of you who have access to the portal will be able to look at the plan directly and solicit and submit your feedback through the portal. You probably all received your login credentials and information already. So you have a means to provide that feedback, and all of the names on that access list have the same capability. The majority of the stakeholders in California will not have access to that portal. So we've come up with this tool as a way to solicit their input. We've organized it in a similar way to the portal, aligned with the sections of the state plan, and we've allowed them to highlight the priorities that they would like to see addressed in the plan, and then we've allowed them the opportunity to fill in which of these major areas it's associated with and what their feedback is. All that happens through that link. That link is live. If you want to go and look at that feedback form, it's out there for you to review right now. And so we would encourage you to take a look at that. We tried to make it simple so that when someone who's busy clicks on that, then it doesn't take them a long time to figure out how to provide the feedback and get it back to us, but yet have enough clarity and specificity so that we can figure out how to collate all this data back together. So that was the goal. And we'll be encouraging them to use this tool. In addition, at the meeting, we'll hand out a hard copy of that, so that if they don't want to take the time and go back and go online and do it, we'll accept their feedback live right there in the meeting, and they can just fill the form out and hand it to us on the way out the door. The next slide, after we've discussed how we're going to gather their data and get their feedback back to us, if you go to the next slide, we're going to encourage AT&T to describe at this point, what is the plan? What does it look like? What are the components of it? What are you doing for us? Specifically, the areas that we would like them to focus in on that we think our stakeholders want to hear about are coverage and cost. Those are priorities. We already know that. That's the most common question we get. What's the coverage? How much does it cost? Timelines, priority, preemption, those things are certainly important, but it's really coverage and cost that they're going to want to hear about. So that's that portion in it. And following this meeting and based on the feedback from the board, we'll sit down with AT&T and discuss with them, okay, here's what we'd like to see for Monday, and here's the content we'd like to see. We've already reviewed a draft presentation from them, and so we've got a starting point. And I don't know if you want to have further discussion. Anyone from AT&T wants to provide a little overview of what you're doing, or if we'll do that later, Pat. But and then once AT&T's done, the next slide, we'll solicit questions. So we've allocated an hour in these meetings for questions and answers, and we'll have people with microphones going around so that folks can hear the question and hear the response. And depending on whether it's with regard to soliciting feedback, or whether it's details about the plan, or questions about the timeline, it may be answered by Cal OES or AT&T or FirstNet, depending on how the question goes. Once the Q&A session is done, we're going to talk about next steps. And really during this part of the presentation, we're just going to highlight the importance of them giving us the feedback. We want their feedback within 2 weeks of when we have the meetings, so that the data kind of rolls in an ideal world, not all at once, not at the end of the time period. And then I've already discussed how we'll consolidate that data and get it back to FirstNet. The next slide, we'll talk about the next steps in the process, and so we'll help them to understand how the plan will be delivered in mid to late September. We'll review that plan with this board, align it to see if our priorities were addressed. Are there still any ongoing gaps? And then we'll have to compare that with an opt-out alternative and present that to the governor. And the governor's decision will come if the 90 days, if everything follows along, you look at mid to late December of when that decision will be due. And then finally, we're going to end with encouraging them, again, to give us input on the next slide. We've got FirstNet has a website that is not secure, firstnet.com. It's live today. It has a high-level overview. This doesn't have the depth and detail that is on the secure portal, but it does provide some information. The next link you see there, that's our online tool for them to provide input. And at the bottom on our CalFRN website, we're going to have meeting outreach locations, copies of the presentation. Once we do our meeting in Sacramento on the 28th, we're going to video that. We'll scrub it for secure content to make sure it can be posted, and we'll post that video as well. So someone who can't go to the meeting, they'll at least see that video and be able to have at least that overview of what the meetings look like. And then the meeting schedule is on the next slide, so you get a sense of where we are. Most of you, probably all of you, received the flyer advertising these meetings. In there, there's a hyperlink that will take you to an Eventbrite site. That site has all the details that we know today about that meeting. Some of the July meetings, we don't have all the details yet, but we'll get them. And that Eventbrite link still allows you to sign up. And as the details become firm, some of the venue locations, we have to vet all that through our procurement process and everything before we can advertise the exact location. So that'll be updated as well. We're trying to stick to at least the cities you see here without changing, and that's the goal. And that's it. That's the overview. So we welcome your comments, and if you could give us a gap analysis of what we're missing, things you'd like to see in there, we'd love to hear your feedback.
Barry.
Thanks, Budge. A lot of good information there. I have a couple of things. First, I just want to kind of go back and make sure we all understand the online process for providing comments. So one way to do it is if you're authorized to access the portal, there's a place within the portal for comments.
That's correct.
So you can do that directly. That information goes to CalOS, or does it go to FirstNet?
It
or-
goes to CalOES, and it has to be vetted through the SPOC before it can be sent
Perfect.
to
That's-
FirstNet.
That's what I wanted to make sure.
Yeah,
So that's
so-
one.
The
one-
instructions that we received during our meeting in Dallas was that all the input would be coming to CalOES to eliminate, duplicity, if there are some duplicate comments, also to resolve any conflicts that there might be, arising, so that we present a single response for the state of California rather than jurisdiction by jurisdiction.
Great, I just wanted to make sure that those comments weren't going directly to FirstNet first, but they'll go to CalOES first.
Well, I think that they'll be able to see them,
Ah,
but they will be sending them directly to us. So if it's something that's more sensitive, I would suggest that you send it directly to us.
I think that's a real good point, So then the second alternative would be for firstnetcalifornia.org to submit your comments online. And if you're not authorized to use the portal, or if you want to send something but don't necessarily want to go through the portal, you can use firstnetcalifornia.org. And then the third way would be on a paper form, which will be distributed at the outreach meetings.
That's correct.
Okay,
That is correct.
good. I think we've covered a lot of different options and alternatives for people to submit comments, so I think that's good. I think you've done a good job in putting that part together. So
Chief?
thank you.
Thanks. I agree with Barry, a lot of good stuff is going on here. My one question is, when people go to the California FirstNet website, when they want to provide feedback, will the same materials that are on the CalOES website be replicated on there, or is it purely just for feedback? So in other words, will folks be able to go to one place, see additional information about the plan, and hear about the town hall meetings and provide feedback, or do they need to go to two separate sites to do that?
At this point, they're going to need to go to two separate sites. We have talked about growing this site and providing additional information on there, but due to the timeline, the first meeting's Monday, the priority was to get the feedback form up. So in 4 days, we were able to get a URL, host the website, develop the form, and post it and get it live for today. We thought that was pretty good.
No, it is, my one recommendation might be, though, that in order to help people, because we're already getting a lot of interest now that the state plan is out in feedback and participation, perhaps maybe an email could be crafted to the board members that we can send to our groups that simply lines out, go to CalOES first, learn about the plan, learn about the questions that are already being asked. Once you do that, here's the site you go to provide feedback. Because I have a feeling already people will go straight to the feedback website and be disappointed that there isn't more. So just setting clear expectations from the
Yeah,
start.
I agree.
It'll
We'll-
help us push it out to our associations or the groups that we represent, and maybe cut back on some of the confusion.
Yeah, I agree. We've already crafted some email messaging content, and we'll beef that up a little bit on this process to help them give the clarity so that the board members don't have to duplicate that for each and every group that you represent. That's a great takeaway. So we have that for an action item.
I was going to say, to piggyback on that, is it possible just to add the FirstNet link onto the feedback site to say, for information on the plan, click here, so that we can actually direct them to one site. From that site, they can then click on to go get the information, as opposed to trying to explain to them, go to this site first, then go to this site, at least one spot to have easy
Yeah, we can
access
see
to
about
everything.
modifying that. It accepts hyperlinks, so that should be doable, but we'll look at that. That's great feedback.
Mr. Edson?
Cost and coverage, as you indicated earlier, was very, very important. And in the Los Angeles area, we've had a lot of agencies already reach out to us and are asking very detailed questions about the cost. Data-only devices, modems and routers, and smartphones, of course. At the presentations, will there be an actual cost sheet that will show the exact costs for each device? Otherwise, that's still going to be a big unknown.
At the present time, the secure portal shows a base cost. It doesn't show, a negotiated price. It just shows the base price. So I would hope that during the AT&T's portion of the presentation, that they can address those questions, because I'm certain that they're going to get questions on coverage, timeline for coverage, and cost. Okay. Brian, you had a...
Yeah, so to build on that, Pat's absolutely right. So there's the baseline starting costs in the portal. We're actively working to get some of the initial services on the primary nationwide contracts over the next several weeks. So as that information is completed, then that information becomes available as well. So there's more additional cost information that become available. We're start to be, on the contract vehicles where a service could be made available. So we're working on that. I think more details will be coming over the next few weeks.
I would also hope that there would be some clarification on the cost differential between the first responders and the extended first responders, and those supplemental services, the utilities. I don't recall, haven't had too much of a time to do a deep dive, but I recall only the base price for first responders being shown.
Yeah, that's correct. So there's as we talked about it in the RFP, we've looked at it from a primary group and an extended primary group of eligible users. Primary being primarily police, fire, EMS. We got actually a lot of feedback at the SPOC meeting about adding emergency management and 911 into that, which we're taking into consideration. There's a lot of feedback in that direction, so we're definitely taking a close look at that. So if those groups are considered primary, and then you have the extended primary, which then extends into your transportation, hospitals, corrections, et cetera. And those group, there is a slight charge for the priority services. When in fact, it's really, the way that we look at it is the primary group, there's no charge, there's no additional charge to have that full priority and preemption. And then for extended primary, there's a slight charge to have those same services, for priority services.
Understand, but in the interest of clarity and being upfront with this, I think we need to be able to share that information, that cost information, directly with the constituents and the public safety agencies and those that are the extended first responders. What is that cost delta going to be for them to do that?
Right. Understand.
If I could follow up on that, is there any chance that on the FirstNet.com, I'm assuming that the prices that are on there are the list price, and that's the list price that's being quoted or documented nationwide for all 50 states. I'm assuming it's the same, and I would assume that there shouldn't be any reason why at some point we couldn't have those price sheets clearly articulated on FirstNet.com so everyone has quick access to seeing what those are.
Yeah, absolutely, Scott. So the goal of the FirstNet.com website is to have it constantly evolving and updating as information comes out. It's really, the initial launch of it was more for outreach and education, and as we transition into service becoming available and more specifics on the costs and features, it will evolve to capture that type of information.
So just for clarification, at these outreach meetings, the cost information that's going to be available is going to be the base coverage that folks will be able to discuss, and so the other unknowns are going to take a couple more weeks?
Yeah, the cost information currently that's available is in the state plan portal, the secure
Right.
side, and on the FirstNet.com, it's just high-level information about the types of rate plans and the types of devices to be available.
Okay.
And then as that information becomes available, we'll push it up to the FirstNet.com website, the open website.
Okay, so I guess I'm just a little bit concerned because we have such a short timeline.
I
So
know.
you're like, it'll become available, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
we're running on a tight timeline, so I think that's a little bit concerning, because especially, I think like the folks have said, these are, coverage and costs is gonna be huge.
And we'll make sure, that we talked about it a bit this morning, right? We'll make sure that we've got representation there that can speak to it in more detail and make sure that feedback can be heard and it can be handled at those levels, so.
Is it possible to get a commitment that those cost sheets will be on the FirstNet.com website by Monday morning?
They will not be there by Monday morning, unfortunately.
Okay, so when will they be there, rather than just sometime in the future? Do you have a date?
I don't have a date, unfortunately. We can find out when that would be, what the estimated date is. Yeah.
Okay, we would appreciate that feedback.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments from the board? Okay, thank you, Budge. Next,
Just one item, Pat. I think we just have to know, because you articulated it, Pat, we're gonna have to give them some sort of range out there on the pricing, and that there's gonna be some negotiations. We have to be able to talk that one in the field on the outreaches, because they're gonna go into their budgetary cycles. That's gonna be their primary touch point to come back and let, their chiefs, fire and law, and sheriffs and everybody know what they're looking at, what that range is gonna be as they look forward into their budgetary planning for consideration. So, it's kind of a critical component. I know you touched on it, but we're gonna have to give them something when we're out there, and as long as it's a range that we can work with them to explain, and obviously it's gonna adjust based on the device types and things that they're looking at, but at least the per estimated cost on the per line, that's the critical piece for us. I think we'll be okay.
and I would also think that some information regarding devices and the cost of those devices and where they can obtain them, because the cycle of equipment replacement in the fire apparatus and in the police cars and in the ambulance, let alone the personal devices, if we're moving towards a band 14, when are those devices going to be? What's the price point going to be? What's the availability going to be? Is AT&T going to offer some kind of, a package where, they buy them in bulk and then pass on some of the savings? Because from my experience from being down south, the cost of some of those devices is a little pricey. And there's not a lot of agencies, particularly in a tough economy, that can go out and spend $1,800 or $2,000 per vehicle for an additional router, let alone, $1,000 or $2,000 for a handheld device. So it would be, I think we will be getting in front of the curve if during these presentations, some of that information can be presented.
Yeah,
And I'm assuming that would be by AT&T.
Absolutely. And what I'd add to that is that, one of the primary benefits of the proposed solution that we have is that it's not band 14 dependent. And as such, the devices, some of the newer devices on the market today can support some of those features. And as band 14 gets rolled in, it should become almost transparent to the user. And then additionally, we have that with the economies of scale that we have to drive the device market. I think that'll be critical to keep costs down.
But along that same line, switching from one carrier to an AT&T could result in a new device.
Yep.
And that new device should be able to incorporate band 14. You shouldn't have to buy one that'll operate on band 17 or one of the other available spectrums, and then go another 2 years and have to pop for another $2,000, per vehicle. So if we can get that information together for them,
Okay.
that will put us ahead of the curve.
Okay.
Okay, any more discussion or any more comments on the presentation or the subject? With that, then, we'll move on to the FirstNet AT&T update. And Brian, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Pat. So as we're pulling up the presentation, I'm guessing it's same before, just advance for us. So just want to thank the CalFRN board for having us here again and giving us this opportunity to provide the update. We're obviously looking very forward to the new phase we've entered into and having the state plans available now to really start having the discussions about getting into the specifics about what the proposed solution is that we're providing or offering, and being able to have that basis to ground these discussions and start to really get into some of the details that we know everyone's been eagerly waiting to do. So we're very excited to be able to do that and start to have these engagements with you. We did not, I will admit, we didn't really know what the expectation was for today, so we have quite a few slides. So I'm just going to go through them quickly so that we can kind of walk you through some of the key points and to provide the update. Budge already gave quite a few updates, as did Pat, on some of the outcomes of the SPOC meeting. that we had a couple weeks ago around the review process. So some of those we'll skip through. But we just wanted to kind of give you a high-level overview on the solution, the state plan process, where we stand today, and where we're headed. Next slide. Just a quick disclaimer, obviously we know this is an open session, so everything we're presenting is open forum, but we just ask that, our proper disclaimer of withholding pictures or taking anything from the slide presentation and putting it out. We'd ask that you refrain from doing that. Next slide. I think we all know that AT&T has become the FirstNet partner that was selected.
Can I interrupt you just for a second?
Yes.
You will not be able to give that disclaimer in the stakeholder outreach meetings.
Got it, okay.
Okay.
So AT&T has been the partner that's selected for delivering the services. I think we all know, and we all know that the strong foundation that they bring in providing service in delivering the FirstNet solution. You can see that, obviously the huge infrastructure investment, the resources they have for technology and innovation, the expertise they have. It's a very strong foundation that we have to begin this 25-year agreement that's been put in place to build out the network. But I think most importantly in this agreement is that AT&T has stood up a completely dedicated team to really focus on the FirstNet deployment. And it's been apparent in the team that they've brought, the focus that they've had, and it's been clear that at the very senior levels, this is the top priority within the organization to deploy this network and make sure we're successful. Next slide. So in talking about the state plan, there's kind of just some the baseline points we wanted to make as we go through this. First and foremost, it is a plan. We're literally not even 3 months after the award, and we've worked very aggressively to put out this plan so we can begin this dialogue. All in told, it's when we worked with the content that got uploaded, it's over 200 pages of content. So there's a lot of content available within the plan itself, but it is still a plan. We know that there's going to be a lot of questions, a lot of details, a lot of specifics that the plan may not answer. And we want to use that plan as a basis for the discussion and continue to have dialogues as much as we can to answer the questions, to learn from stakeholders, of what may be missing, what more specifics may be asked for, so we can continue to refine not only the plan, but the solution that we're delivering going forward. Nothing is really kind of fully baked. We're looking to have this dialogue ongoing throughout the state plan process and beyond to make sure that we're constantly listening and adjusting for the needs. So not only is it the plan, but it's the focus, if you recall, is really to make sure that we're providing the necessary information for the governor to make that key decision of whether or not he wants to proceed with the FirstNet proposed solution or opt out and take on that responsibility to deploy the network within California to connect into the nationwide network. So really we tried to present a lot of information around that key decision process. That was really the focus in making sure we had that primary information. We tried to provide a lot of information that we heard from consultation about general reference type information or information that stakeholders are interested in. You'll see a lot of that information that's actually not necessarily germane or key to the decision, but there's a lot of information on that as well. And we wanted to do that based on the consultation feedback that we had heard. We've said time and time again, the SPOCs and the governance boards that you've created here are going to be key to this process, key to consolidating, receiving that feedback and providing it to us on behalf of your stakeholders. So we're really pleased to hear that, the robust system you've put in place to go engage your stakeholders, get that feedback and provide it back to us. It's the only way we'd be able to gather and get that feedback. So it's happy to hear, and just again, reiterating how important it'll be for you guys to provide that feedback on your stakeholders' behalf. And the last key point we wanted to make is that this consultation process that we've been engaging, we really see going on, as I mentioned, throughout the state plan process and well beyond state plan delivery. And that is in the form of continuing to engage public safety and understanding what the needs are, what the desires are, how our solutions meet those needs, and what adjustments could be made. I think there was some misunderstandings potentially that the state plan review process would be kind of the end of the consultation process. And then that's just not the truth. We're planning to definitely continue to engage, to continue to stay connected, just as we have up until this point. Next slide. So, Budge talked on this slide, so don't want to really, there's nothing I think much more to hit on other than just, again, the different phases of this process. The key point, as mentioned, is that the opportunity to provide this feedback and comment is really what the focus is on that first 45 days. And we wanted to make sure that we had enough time to incorporate that feedback and make any refinements necessary before that state plan goes to the governor in the September timeframe. Again, it doesn't mean that we won't continue to engage, continue to seek input, and continue to learn from you beyond that 45-day window. Next slide. So with the state plan portal release, as I mentioned, there's quite a bit of information that we've presented. We've really broken it into 6 kind of high-level categories, and we'll go through a little bit more detail of what's in each of those. But at a high level, there's the FirstNet overview and background information. There's a section on the consultation and outreach, the vast consultation outreach we've done within the state, across the country. There's information on the governor's decision, some of the key information that's there for both the opt-in process or the opt-out process. Again, the goal was to always provide as much information as we could and in making an informed decision. There's the coverage section, which has the interactive coverage map, which, to no surprise, has been kind of the top spot with users that have gained access to the portal. And that allows you to take a deep dive into the coverage that's being proposed, to look at it by the different deployment phases, and really allow you to zoom in and zoom out into the areas that make most sense to users. The network architecture is more of the technical and more detailed side for that specific network deployment. And as Bud showed in one of the groupings you had, not only did you have your coverage section, then you had your network architecture section. So very much aligned to the way the information is presented. And then lastly, the products and services, which is really geared around the devices, the applications, the solution, the high-level features of the network, along with the wireless rate plan information, the cost information. So that's available in products and services. Next slide. This is just to try to highlight, again, we've already discussed that we launched 2 websites at the same time. The state plan portal, as I just described, is really kind of focused on that governor's decision and trying to make sure we address those key decisions of who ultimately will be deploying the RAN network within the state and who's taking on those responsibilities to deploy that network to deliver the service to public safety. FirstNet.com we recognize as a high level. It's a summary information. It's really kind of the outreach education to continue that dialogue and to really focus on agencies or users that might be looking at this more from the adoption perspective. So there's certainly overlap in information with coverage with some of the devices, but it's really trying to get out in front of that information to present that type of information in preparation for adoption. So those are kind of the 2 key fundamental differences. You have the larger outreach towards adoption and the agencies and getting more information about FirstNet at a high level versus the more detailed, in-depth information that's available in the state plan portal geared for that, informing that governor's decision process. Next slide. One more. So we just want to take a quick step here and just really quickly go through the key solution elements that you will find as you go through that state plan. Next slide, please. And at a high level, as I've said and will continue to say, we've been listening to public safety through this robust consultation program. We will continue to listen to public safety, knowing that is the focus of this network. It's really to build a network for public safety. That is our sole focus. That is our sole mission, and we will continue to listen to the community to make sure that we're doing what we're intending to do. One of the goals set forward in the statute was speed to market and getting this solution and getting these capabilities in the hands of public safety users. And we've looked at that from the get-go. And we believe that the solution that we're offering definitely achieves that and very quickly gets robust capabilities in public safety's hands from the early outset and allows us to grow and expand and building upon that. As I mentioned before, that the economies of scale and the resources that we have to bring with this solution, I think we'll see a lot of synergies develop with, if you think applications, you think devices, targeted public safety. I think we're looking, we're excited that this can really change the ability to deliver this type of service to public safety like we haven't seen before. we've heard time and time again the importance of public safety grade networks and how important that is. And so the goal there is to focus to continue to have the robust, high availability of a network that can deliver those critical services. And last, and we always remind people every time we've said this for years and we continue to say it, this decision process commits public safety to nothing from an adoption standpoint. That once we deploy a network in the states and territories, that it is to each user or agency to choose whether or not they wanted to choose and to purchase that service. So it's up to us to make sure that we earn that business and we earn that service, and that it's not going to just be handed to us. Next slide. So just wanted to highlight really quickly, high level, on some of the FirstNet solution offering, the value proposition that we like to talk about as we kind of talk through the solution from top to bottom. You'll see this represented or reflected not only in the state plan portal, but also in FirstNet.com. You'll see some of these key points just discussed in various detail. Certainly the coverage footprint that we're bringing, there's a strong baseline that's starting upon. Using AT&T's existing infrastructure and delivering priority in the outset on LTE, AT&T LTE bands provides a robust coverage solution right out of the bat. Additionally, bringing into bear the Wi-Fi hotspots, the satellites and deployables really brings a robust starting point of coverage to be built up on. Additionally, the in-building solutions that are available today, the coverage will extend to those in-building solutions, so that the same priority service that's available day one, that's also then, as preemption is rolled into it at the end of the year, that extends into those in-building solutions, allowing service to be provided, prioritized service in building, which we heard was always a key point with public safety operations. Deployables, we're dedicating 72 deployables solely for public safety use for the FirstNet deployment that will be distributed throughout the country. So that's definitely a unique capability of providing that service, in addition to some of the fleet of deployables that AT&T has already existence that can be leveraged. We're looking to provide, as mentioned, get on the common contract vehicles and to have very competitive offering of service and service plans, knowing how important it is to not only deliver service, but we know and recognize there's a big, decision that has to be made in migrating from one service to another, and you have to be competitive in the service rates to be able to attract users to do that. Next slide. Talked a little bit about devices and the benefit of having the scales of economy for the kind of the commercial devices that we know are in use today, but also then now having the focus to drive some of the specialty devices that public safety also desires. So really striking that balance of being able to drive that with the economies of scale and then also lowering cost. Additionally, we've heard repeatedly, bring your own devices is a very common policy, and so we're looking at different ways to support that as well. Basic services and features, we heard repeatedly that we at a minimum, the service set needs to include what services and features are available today. And that will be made available. And then those services, we're looking at the roadmap you'll see in the state plan of how those services eventually start to expand into mission critical services and the expansion of those services that we know public safety really desires on a network like this. Priority and preemption, we've heard that time and time again, how key that is. And that we're looking with that rollout of our offering to have that prioritized service initially upon opt-in with preemption to be added by the end of the year as we roll out, and then eventually with the FirstNet core deployment into next year, where we'll continue to build upon those priority and preemption capabilities and the features that come with that service. Cybersecurity, absolutely critical. As a result, we are proposing to build a completely dedicated cybersecurity center focused on the network operations for the FirstNet solution. Next slide. ICAM was one of the key tenets or the key capabilities that we look to deploy with the solution, specifically to start to facilitate single sign-on and to really try to drive opportunities to support the benefits of single sign-on. Certainly for the initial deployments of all the portals, all the information we have with the FirstNet service, it will already be built upon the ICAM solution. We're deploying a FirstNet App Store where applications that will go through the app certification program can be made available, in addition to the applications that can still be accessed through the Play Store, the Google App Store, or the iTunes or the Play Store, just as you would access applications today. Local control was another one of the tenets that was been critical that public safety explained to us that they need, that we heard through consultation. And so we'll be rolling out that implementation that really puts the decision-making process for managing local control and priority and preemption at the incident level. The public safety homepage is kind of the one-stop area where users would have access to the information, or agents would have access to information pertinent to the FirstNet solution offering. So that would be the interface for the local control, the interface for managing users, accounts, services, all driven through the public safety homepage. Next slide. Excuse me. And then the last 4 topics, the app developer program. We feel we're excited about this opportunity to really bring together the application development community to focus on applications specifically driven for public safety. We know there are quite a few out there today. We look at this as really a catalyst and opportunity to continue to drive those solutions and being able to have this opportunity to facilitate that interaction with public safety and FirstNet and AT&T. Solutions are the high-level overall solutions that we know that are critical to delivering a service, mobile VPN services, push-to-talk services, opportunities and different LMR integration, PSAP integration. So there's a lot of additional services that will enhance the solution offering or the FirstNet offering. Training we know is key. We're looking at how we can leverage training opportunities to deliver training of use for the network and the services we provide. And then lastly, dedicated customer care for this network. We are standing up a separate customer care group with facilities distributed throughout the country that will be solely focused on the FirstNet users that we have on the network. Next slide. I'm going to skip through, actually, just in the essence of time, if we could skip to a couple slides. Already kind of talked about this stuff. One more. So just want to kind of give a couple more quick highlights on the portal as we wrap up. So as I mentioned, the 6 sections, 6 overarching we call them pillars, but sections within the state plan portal. We have here are the FirstNet overview and the state plan consultation. I touched on those at a high level. This kind of gives you one level of detail more of what exists in that what is FirstNet and state plan consultation. So in what is FirstNet, we talk about just the background of FirstNet for users that may not have had that experience or a background or maybe kind of new to this process or just need a refresher. There's some background information on FirstNet itself. Similarly, background information on the state plan, that process and what it's about, as well as the acquisition overview, which was really the basis of the acquisition process that informed or it was the basis of the state plan. And then lastly in this section, this FirstNet overview, which is essentially those topics that I just covered are covered in that section on the value of FirstNet or the value proposition. So that's a good reference to go back and take a look at kind of those high-level topics. It's also a good launching point to deeper into the portal, as if there's topics there that are discussed and there's more detail, it gives you links into those areas. State plan consultation is the next section. As I mentioned, there's been a very robust program that we've had in engaging California. We know that there's been obviously a tremendous amount of outreach that's gone on beyond that. But we really wanted to kind of highlight and memorialize what we had done through this process, what we had learned through this process, not only for state consultation and the state engagements, but also what we've done nationwide and working with the major associations, working with the PSAC, working with our FirstNet consultation program. So all of that is aggregated and captured in the state consultation process. The last point I'll point out is that with California being one of the 5 states that has an early builder program, we discussed the engagement going on there and the processes and the steps going on with that early builder and the integration of that network. Next slide. So the next area to talk about is coverage. And we know that, one of the points we heard in consultation that if we're going to be delivering a plan, a state plan, and one of the basis of key information in that plan was going to be coverage, that we know that looking at coverage on a paper map doesn't always suit users well. And so that was one of the key drivers that really drove an interactive web portal for delivering a coverage map. And so this is just a snapshot of the interactive coverage map that you will see when logging into the tool, the high level, the different layers that are available. We wanted to make sure there was a lot of flexibility for users to not only drill down into areas of interest, but be able to take the different the layers that might be of interest and turn those on and off, whether it's the technology layer of what LTE with priority and preemption or some legacy layers, or the coverage objectives that were submitted to us through the consultation process. Additionally, there's opportunities to toggle between the different deployment phases. So you can see what's available potentially immediately after opt-in versus what the kind of the longer term deployment plan looks like. Next slide. This gets into the network architecture. As I mentioned, this is the more detailed area where we have what we heard through the consultation that stakeholders wanted to see very specific information about the network deployment. So this is where we tried to accommodate some of that type of information. We get into a detailed breakdown of the RAN architecture and the deployment, detailed breakdown of the core network, to network implementation, and finally cybersecurity. So a lot of detailed information for those that might be on the technical evaluation. Probably be spending some time in that section. Next slide, please. And then lastly, the products and services. And I mentioned, so there's a deeper dive on the features, which really kind of hit some of those key points of the value proposition I walked through, like QPP, local control, mission critical services, what the product roadmap looks like. There's a deep dive on devices, what some of that device certification process looks like, testing, bring your own device, mobile device management, wireless rate plans, applications, which again gets into more details of not only the applications, but the application store, the application developer program, and how that works. And then lastly, the business operations. It kind of highlights information on the customer care, the sales, marketing, distribution. Next slide, please. One more. And the last section in the state plan portal is the governor's decision. So once you've had the opportunity to review all of the information presented from the solution side, this gets into having that key information that will help California make an informed decision on what that process entails and what it looks like from an opt-in decision versus what the types of requirements that would be expected in an opt-out scenario. We wanted to make sure that information was presented up front so that there were no surprises. And so not only is there a guide that kind of highlights the basic steps for the FCC process, the NTA process, as well as the spectrum lease agreement that you would enter into with FirstNet. It includes all of our network policies that are referenced, key information on that spectrum lease agreement. And it also has a library of some of these key resources and documents, which also includes in this section a state executive summary, which is also a very good resource that kind of is a standalone document, takes you from top to bottom of what's available, of what you could use to walk through if you want to talk from the very beginning of what is FirstNet all the way through the process, the solution, down to the ultimate decision that needs to be made. Next slide. I talked about this as you can just see here that some of the key documents and information that's available in that governor's library. I hit on some of those, the executive summary, the network policies. We've created an opt-out requirements matrix that kind of highlights the requirements from our perspective that would align with the state plan. So it takes the state plan content, aligns to the network policies. It looks at the FCC requirements that would apply or could apply, as well as the NTIA evaluation criteria that could apply. Next slide. I mentioned the state executive summary is in that library as well. And not only is the state executive summary a source of content within the portal, there's a very nicely formatted version that you can download and use if you want to kind of just take a look at it offline. That, again, hits from the very what is FirstNet through the acquisition process, the solution, some key points into the governor's decision process. Next slide. One more. Just highlight this briefly because I know it was already discussed. Within the portal, we did create a commenting process. So there is the ability to embed comments if users are going into that and they want to provide comments on what they're reading. That is available, and with the Spock level access, you can go and consolidate all those comments and feedback. So recognizing that you guys have your separate form that you're putting in place, if comments are still captured through this, there is the ability to extract those comments and you can get them integrated into the form that you're using. Next slide. You can skip through these. These are kind of all touching on the same thing. Next slide. This just goes through the review process that we already talked about. And then one more slide. So just to recap, as I mentioned, the state plan portal we recognize has a lot of information. There's a lot of content available. We know that some users may want to get into even more detailed technical discussions or more discussions on whatever there may be of interest. And so that's why not only do we want to continue to engage with you to talk you through the state plan and make sure there's a good understanding. If there's additional details that there's a desire to go through, to the extent we know them and have them available, we'll certainly be we can work with you and having those types of dialogue and discussion and making sure we bring the right people to those types of discussions. Again, focused on the opt-in, opt-out discussion. The role you will be providing is going to be critical to this process and getting that feedback to us and making sure it's representative of your stakeholders. And again, we can't stress enough how important it's going to be to continue this dialogue beyond just the state plan process. So with that, that is the end of my presentation.
Any questions for Brian? Go ahead.
Thanks. Thanks, Brian. Great presentation. I would just suggest that perhaps the slides that you showed on the layout of the portal plan be made available to authorized users. I think they'd be very helpful in navigating the page.
Okay.
Maybe even as part of the portal, maybe as a roadmap overview or something link. But they seem to be very helpful in organizing and explaining how the site's
structure.
organized, and it's a pretty complicated site, or at least it's not self-evident when you first start going through.
A lot of information
A
there.
lot of
yeah.
information, yep.
Absolutely.
So if you could consider making those available, I think it could be helpful.
Yeah, we can share those with the team. We also have the overall site map that we can share that kind of shows the page and the structure and the layout of all the pages that could help.
That'd be very helpful.
Yep.
I'd like to tie into Mr. Frazier's comments. On the site, is there a single point and click to actually get the full 200-page plan, if you will, as one document? I know it's partitioned off into different parts and pieces, but is there a master one document, if you will?
There's no single place to print off the entire thing. There is printing capabilities that you can go in by section, and you can print the particular page you're on or the whole section that you're in. So if there are pages of or sections of interest, you can do that through the printing function.
One of the observations I made when you talked about the layers in the coverage maps is that some of the layers are not independent of each other. Like you can see the LTE with preemption and priority layer, but you cannot toggle and just see what the band 14 coverage is going to be. And then California was very step forward with what our coverage priorities were, and a lot of that was based on the 911 calls and on our tribal nations. Mm-hmm. And you can't drill down and see that. There's no indication on the number of sites that are going to be deployed. The number of sites that are deployed is just a blue mass or a very dark blue mass that shows a representation of coverage. And in a lot of instances, that coverage is a misrepresentation, and I'm concerned with that. Because as we go through our outreach meetings, the users out there know what their coverage is today, and a lot of the representation in the maps is a misrepresentation, and I don't want to see the FirstNet and the AT&T and the Cal OES team be on the defensive immediately because of a misrepresentation.
Yeah, it's good feedback.
And it would clearly being able to toggle and seeing what the band 14 coverage is going to be at the 1 through 5 years, independent of what the existing coverage is, as well as what the number of sites are, and how those align with our highways and our dense population areas, And most importantly, our 911 calls is going to be extremely important. Today, you cannot see that granularity. Thank you.
So I hadn't really thought about it until the award was given. But does the state plan address options for government entities that have large contracts already in place with other service providers? How they're going to maybe break away from the rest of their city or county or institution in terms of a broad cellular plan that's already in place? You know, will there be a national purchasing agreement that local governments or state governments could use
Or
in terms
state
of
purchasing.
simplifying the process as far as that goes? And my other question is, having seen for the first time the requirement that the devices be AT&T devices, is AT&T prepared to buy out if people bring their own devices? Are they prepared to buy out personal cell phone plans from other cell phone providers if people decide to bring their own device but are currently under another carrier?
So on the contract side, so we're definitely looking at some of the nationwide contracts and how we prioritize getting on those ones that have the furthest reach and the biggest impact. NASPO being a great example, formerly WISCA. So we're working aggressively to get on some of those contract vehicles to make it available to as many users as possible, and we'll continue to grow and expand on the different contract vehicles depending on what the needs are of the agencies. As far as buyout or transition, I can't speak to that. I just don't know what those different solutions will look like. But we know that we'll definitely be, that there is going to be aggressive plans available to make sure that we're starting to really, entice that adoption and make that transition.
I think it'll be difficult, especially for agencies or people who use their own personal device, if they still have 2 years left in a contract.
Right.
To have to pay to get out of that
Yep.
contract to come over. My last comment is, and this was a great presentation, is there any requirements in the state plan for ease of use of technology? And the example that I would use is there was mention of in-vehicle routers. People have IT departments that range from hundreds to one-ish.
Yeah, right.
And things like in-vehicle routers are complicated to set up, they're complicated to keep running. Are we going to have some sort of technical specification in terms of both user interface and operation of infrastructure devices like that that'll be deployed out to each agency that will require a simple user interface to maintain and interact with the devices?
So it's great feedback, and I think that's a perfect example where we will continue to have that dialogue on the very specific operational elements and impacts of the deployment of the service and what are the needs of the specific agency or the agencies. Right now in the plan, it doesn't get into that type of detail yet, but it's not that we're not looking forward to having the discussion, just not there yet.
Comment, Pat?
Absolutely.
So to echo what Pat said about being able to see the Band 14 sites, we can't see that. And of course, having been involved in this for a long time, we're very concerned about public safety grade construction, as many people have heard me say. And with the seismic issues we have in California, it's very important that we know what sites will cover what areas should, a large earthquake come here, because there's going to be a blend of some public safety grade constructed Band 14 sites and some public safety grade constructed AT&T sites, and then some regular constructed AT&T sites. And from my first blush at looking at the plan and the coverage, I can't tell where that public safety grade construction sites coverage is to ensure that we have data communications during a large earthquake in California.
Yeah, we saw that feedback, heard the feedback, and so we can work with, again, places where you want to drill down into more detail, we can work with you on how we do accomplish that.
Well, it would help if some of these improvements in the draft plan can be rolled out, so that at the end of the 45 days, we can see some of these issues addressed, so that we're not waiting until the last 90 days and there is no comment period at that point.
Right.
It's either in or it's out, and it's somebody's decision not ours.
Yeah, that was definitely feedback that we heard loud and clear at the SPOC meeting as changes are made or enhancements are made, knowing too that some of this content is actually the same content that's delivered to all states and territories. We're not customizing the products and services, for example. It's the same product offering to all states and territories. So as we make updates, we make refinements, we're definitely looking at ways we push that back out for awareness. So even if it was something that California, for example, didn't make, but we've made the change based on feedback we heard otherwise, or other places, that you would be notified of those types of changes.
I have a comment, Pat. So I haven't gone through the portal extensively. I went right to coverage, right, to look at it.
One of
And-
those ones, yeah.
So what I'm trying to figure out, I saw it's like 78.1, 79.1% tribal coverage. So what I wasn't able to tell from the map, and I went to the folks that I know were probably out there and having it would be a challenge. I couldn't figure that part out. Who's being left out from that? Out of the 109 federally recognized tribes, I can't figure that part of it out.
Yeah, so that's a great example of, we recognize in one of the coverage objectives or the high priority issues was that California submitted was tribal coverage area. And so we provided that metric specific for California, knowing that was a priority. That's the aggregate of coverage for all the tribal areas within the state. But we will definitely look and work with you on how we can kind of drill down into more detail to provide more specifics on the tribal areas and where those gaps may be.
Right, and the solutions, I'm concerned that it would be deployables, because we've heard from tribes in the consultation session we had specifically for tribes that that wasn't a solution, and that those aren't dependable, and that they are concerned if that's what they're stuck with, and then their communities are, in jeopardy. So I'd be curious about the methods for that. So, and I'll defer to the Tribal Advisory Committee, who has some very technical experts there. The problem here that we face with the portal, the Tribal Advisory Committee can review it, but as you know, and I'm sure Adam's done a lot of education at FirstNet about the special relationship tribal governments have as politically legal distinctions as sovereign nations. So, and of course, it's not your fault with the act and how they put it, the
Right.
tribes within the states, but to conduct government-to-government tribal consultation is a problem when it's in a portal, and it's hard to, you can't give them a plan and say, let's talk about this, what does this mean to you? So I think, of course, the cost is going to be an issue, and the coverage is going to be an issue. So what I would like to see from that is, and I've heard from some folks who, are in the tribal community, that FirstNet might be looking at a tribal consultation policy. Is that the case? If so, when does that take place? Oh,
Morning, everybody. Adam Geisler, Tribal Government Liaison for FirstNet. Miyo Machachi, no Madam Geisler, no Noinai Payom Kuwichum. So with regards to the question that you asked, Heather, we have a tribal working group within FirstNet, and the tribal working group has worked on packaging a tribal consultation policy that will go in action after the governor's decisions have been made, as a result of trying to work around the context of the law as it's been written up to this point, and the role and function that's been assigned to the states. So we're working on a timeline for that rollout, and how to integrate that, not only in terms of sharing the information to the tribes once that happens, but also looking at a functionality within the portal itself or within the website, so that we can have a digital way of actually initiating that engagement. And I think just to highlight some of the conversation around here that I've heard around the table, because you guys know I've sat in and around this table with you on both sides of it. One of the things that I'm seeing in this process, and just to, again, continue to keep in mind, you've heard Brian say this, is that this is a starting point for a 25-year relationship, and probably will extend beyond that. And just to keep in mind that the dialogue and what you see just has to be a line in the sand, so we can finalize our contract obligations and move into what we need to move into to build this thing. The exciting part with the consultation policy for tribes and the continued commitment is that this isn't a done dialogue. And I know that AT&T has continued to make the commitment, as some of the state leadership heard in Dallas, that there is a line in the sand for the delivery of this plan, but there is also an ongoing, working, engaged relationship that they want to have with the public safety community, with the tribal community, to really solve this solution. And it's been made very clear that this is their priority at this point, all the way from the top within their organization, as it is ours. So with regards to tribal consultation, we're really looking forward to the governor's decision coming and going. So as we see where the challenges are in Indian country, we can start to address what capabilities are out there, if there's opportunity for co-location, if there's opportunity for joint venture. I mean, all of those things have been laid out and we're committed to exploration out at the Dallas engagement from the leadership there. So just keep that in mind as we start to tackle this, because you and I both know in our time in Indian country that deployable solutions for them is not a solution. For a lot of other reasons, and public safety, as everybody around here knows, tribes are playing a pretty extensive role in that here in the state. So we have it on our radar, and we're looking forward to the rollout of the policy, and I'll be continuing to work with you and the Tribal Advisory Committee as we roll the language out to start enacting it.
Thanks, Adam. I think as a federal authority, though, there's nothing that precludes you from developing a tribal consultation policy that you can talk and work with tribes in a government-to-government fashion now, should they request consultation. I'm not sure about the thinking around waiting until the governor opts in or opts out, because I think for what we're going through right now, there has to be we don't have the answers about what you all are proposing. You have the answers, correct? So what I wrestled with is going with the Tribal Advisory Committee, we discussed, how do we go conduct consultations? So really, we've been hamstrung because we're not able to give them information up front. They have to have special access and to really dig through that and understand it. So we have a small committee, none of which are tribal leaders or elected by their government or their people to serve in that capacity. They're more technical folks who can review and look at it. We do have a meeting on here, so we're creatively looking at how can we get through that piece of it to really make sure that they have the right information for consultation. So I think that right now it would be helpful if the tribes were able to have more access. I understand there's reasons why not, though. But right now, I'm just looking to you for solutions, and that's why I asked for the tribal consultation policy and the methodology as to why we would wait until there's an opt-in or opt-out for the governor.
You're not going to like my answer. I don't like my answer, just to be point blank with everybody, but the challenge is the way the law was constructed, as you've identified. And so the law clearly identifies the role and function of the state as Congress enacted it. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with Indian country, there are elements in which Congress will delegate authorities to states. For example, on the law enforcement side, Public Law 280 is a perfect example of that, right? Concurrent jurisdiction and those types of activities. And so unfortunately, I guess it's a personal opinion, based upon the law, I'll say it that way, based upon the law, we had to try to work within the parameters of that. And needless to say, we at FirstNet have continued to do tribal engagement in other forms and methodologies, not formalized consultation, as I know the state and the executive order conducts business with the tribes. But we do have a tribal working group that's out there. We have our tribal team. Ongoing engagement from the NEPA and NHPA perspective from environmental. That consultation under federal law is still occurring from that perspective, which is a sensitive topic. So, and in the meantime, I know we've done a lot of work with the state to make sure that we're going out collaboratively and working with Indian country. I know Mr. Mallon has joined me up in Northern California and Southern California, and you know, we've been working with Indian country. So my hat's off to OES also in working with us to do the workaround. But the bottom line is what the law didn't describe was the relationship with tribes post-governor decision, which is why we saw an opportunity to, and that is why it has been constructed the way that it has. So as you get when you get an opportunity to see the policy, it was just passed by our by the PSAC here 2 weeks ago now in Dallas. You'll see the ability or our attempt to try to identify what the process has kind of looked like up to this point, but then really focusing on the more direct government-to-government engagement, which our Chief Customer Care Officer also made a commitment to out in Dallas, for those of you that were there, if you remember that. So, like I said, I don't like my answer. But that's really the way that we are able to, unfortunately, have to work through this process and trying to find unique opportunities to work with tribes, and that's the one. So regarding the engagement on the 27th of July, I noticed that on the calendar. I'm looking forward to working with OES and the state to talk about how we best approach that, because I'm assuming there are going to be a lot of tribes and there are going to be those expectations. So we're going to have probably a little more engaged dialogue on how to meet that need and expectations with both FirstNet and our partner in a way that it can still be meaningful, but still working within the parameters of the law, so.
I would just add, I think that it's something that we should talk about maybe a little more in depth and not monopolize the time here, but there's been contacts by FirstNet out there and asking the tribes to support their position and opting into the plan. So I think that to say that for a consultation is not appropriate until after the governor's decision may not be exactly in line with those actions. So, but let's just go ahead and we can talk about it another time. I'm sure we'll be at lunch or something soon. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, without further comment, we'll move on to the next item, which is a State Plan Advisory Committee by Mr. Fraser.
Yes, thank you, Pat. I don't have much of anything to report. The advisory committee has been, like everyone, kind of waiting for the state plans to come out so we can begin to jump in them and jump in and start reviewing them. And we will be doing that. I say the committee hasn't been very busy, but I know Cal OES staff has been incredibly busy preparing us for review of the state plans and for possible alternatives as well. But I guess the only thing I would add is that the committee stands ready to take any direction from the board and do whatever needs to be done at this point to assist in evaluating and reaching some recommendations. So we stand ready to move whenever we get some directions.
Get it done. Okay, and then you also have, sorry. You also have the next one on the PSAC update?
Sure. The PSAC, this is the FirstNet Public Safety Advisory Committee. We had an in-person meeting last Thursday, June 15th. We went over all of the same details of the FirstNet AT&T plan and the solutions and the portal that we saw here today, so I won't go back over those types of things. I did want to mention that according to my count, there are only 2 members on the PSAC from California, myself and Kurt Hagman, who is, I think, a San Bernardino County supervisor, who was at the meeting. I had some good conversations with him, and he has some interesting viewpoints on FirstNet from San Bernardino County, which obviously is a very big county, probably the biggest county in the nation, and is some cities there, but a lot of empty space. So we had some good conversations, and I think Mr. Hagman is interested in getting more involved and providing some feedback as well. The only other thing I will add is that we did have a briefing from Jeff Bratcher, the CTO of FirstNet. It was very informative on some of the technical details of the FirstNet AT&T solution. But one statement he made really registered on me, and that is the fact that because AT&T is contributing its entire commercial spectrum in addition to the public safety 20 megahertz of spectrum that Congress allocated. That means in some places there can be up to 100 megahertz of spectrum that would be available on a prioritized basis for first responders with this AT&T solution. And that kind of registered with me in terms of perhaps in many cases not having to worry too much about congestion and about having to do local control of priority and preemption, as we've discussed here in the past, of having to make adjustments on the fly. With that much spectrum available, I think that it's going to be very rare that we will have to interfere with the quality of service functionality of the network. That obviously is given normal day-to-day occurrences, and when the big one hits in California, it could be a different story. But that to me is made an impression. So I think that's really about everything. So unless there are any questions, so the PSAC anticipates a series of webinar and conference calls as we go through this process of state decisions. So we will probably be meeting a little more often over the next few months, and we will have another in-person meeting sometime in late fall. So that's pretty much what I have.
Thank you. Any questions for Barry? Okay, on to the statewide, I'm sorry?
Hey, Barry, was there anything contentious or on policy and/or direction and/or in light of Kurt's comments when he's trying to take a little different tact on opportunities that are there that present themselves for the build-out? Was there any feedback that came from that, those pieces, or are we kind of staying the course where we are right now?
Let me just say that the PSAC has a two-part meeting. One is a public meeting that's available via webcast. The other is a closed session meeting. I can say the closed session always has a very lively discussion of various issues. And Mr. Hagman was contributing to those lively discussions. But because it's a closed session, I probably can't really go into a lot of the details, but we can probably chat sometime. But certainly there are a lot of questions raised, some concerns by the PSAC members, with, I think, the understanding that this FirstNet AT&T solution is the one that's on the table, and in general, there are a lot of benefits and advantages to this current solution.
Okay, if there's no more comments, then we'll move to the next item, which is the statewide interoperability coordinator, and that's Budge.
So that's back to me. So I'll just give you a highlight of what we've been doing with regard to FirstNet. So I kind of put on my other hat, and this form that we sent out that advertises all the meetings throughout the state, you've got a copy in your binder. What I did was I sent that out to all the planning area chairs and the co-chairs. They then subsequently sent it out to all of their contacts that they have on their lists. And we've started to get a lot of feedback. Obviously, our emphasis is on the Fresno, Sacramento, and Dublin meetings, which happen next week. So we've started that push already. In addition, I've provided them this summary sheet that you see in your binder as well, which shows the priorities as we know them today, so we can try and focus them in on providing feedback to us on, have we missed the mark? Is there a priority that you have that's not on here? Which of these are most important? And then also the feedback form that's in all of your binders as well. That's what will be handed out at the meetings, and you'll see the second page of that is the actual feedback form that if you want to fill it out in person. So we're trying to get them this information so that they have the ability to field some of those questions down at their level, and if they can't answer them, it'll come back up to me, and I'll help provide those answers. So really, the point now is I'm trying to use the CalSeek and all of those planning area chairs and groups that are out there to get this message out on these meetings. So I'd encourage, all of those of you that are representing agencies, organizations here at the table to do the same. And again, to the action item before, we can send you a crafted message that you can use to just send out after you tweak it for your own agency needs, so that way you don't have to reinvent the wheel when you send out these invites. So, and that's really what we've been focusing on at the statewide interoperability coordinator level. Some of the initiatives I talked about the last time I spoke to this board are ongoing. We're continuing to update the CalIFOG to an electronic version. We've got some technical assistance requests out there to do other initiatives throughout the state, but really a lot of the efforts focused around FirstNet and the state plan and what it means for California. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay, any questions from Mr. Courier? Do we have any, we don't have any public comment cards. It is, however, my distinct pleasure to introduce the Director of the California Office of Emergency Services, Mark Ilarducci. Sir.
Yeah, well, good afternoon, everyone.
Do you have the talking points?
I think I know what to say.
Okay,
I'm good.
perfect.
Good to see you all. I'm running crazy busy today, so many things going on. But I did want to swing by and touch base with you all. First of all, I want to thank you all for your service with this effort. It's not, it's a complex issue, and it's, and it really is an effort that has an impact throughout California and all our public safety entities. So the work that we do, we have to do purposefully, and it has to resonate well with our public safety community, our first responders, and local government, our state agencies. And I think, it's obviously got a lot of promise, but I also think that, we need to make sure the due diligence is done. I kind of feel like I'm preaching to the choir here because you guys have been doing a great job on all of this, without question. But the draft plan has been released. I think that it's important, sort of confidential now, but I think you still need to be taking that draft plan and reading it and thinking about it and talking to your various areas that you represent on what it means, because I still feel like there's, with all deference to our FirstNet friends, it's my sense to some degree is that they're looking from a nationwide basis that you've seen one state, and that's just not the case. Rolling something like this out in New Hampshire or Vermont or even Texas, which is pretty flat, is not California. It's not. We are the largest, most populous state. We have a lot of complexities. We've got topographies and demographics that are unlike any other place. This is a nation state. And so we have to do this right. This whole concept of opt-in, opt-out, I still need to feel comfortable that you all are comfortable. And that the recommendations coming from you all, that we're all on the same page with all of that. So, and that actually goes to our partners at FirstNet and now AT&T. We sometimes get, FirstNet going this way and AT&T wanting to go this way or whatever. We need everybody on the same page. One team, one fight on this issue is very, very important. Because, obviously it's got some great capability. And I think that there's some, while we all say that, maybe understand the great capability, there are others in the state that have reservation as to where we're going. And I want to make sure that we take the time to do the due diligence at this point in the game with this draft plan, that the plan addresses what our needs are, and then us to, if it doesn't, make the recommendations to make the plan serviceable for us. So I have spent a lot of time talking with my colleagues across the country on this topic, both in the area of emergency management and the area of Homeland Security advisors. And maybe it doesn't come as a surprise to you, everybody's at different spots in the country. Some are all about it. Some are wanting to go a completely different direction. Some are opting to opt out. But then thinking maybe we should opt back in. Still very, very confused. So there's been a lot of activity going on, but now we're more focused and things are moving faster. I, in my role, get a lot of incoming from, and arguably correctly, sheriffs, police chiefs, fire chiefs. They want to know what's happening. Governor's tracking on this now. Governor's staff has been briefed on this on more than a couple of 3 occasions. We've talked to members of the legislature. But the fact of the matter is there's still a little bit of due diligence work to be done. So anyway, I want to thank you all. Those are sort of my thoughts. And what you do, really, what you're doing on this group is so critically important to be able to provide a sense to me that making this decision, and more importantly, making the decision, because really taking it to the boss, right? Taking it to the governor to say, okay, this is the process we went through. These are our representatives. These are the recommendations, whether it's options or recommendations of what we want to do. So, happy to answer any questions. Great.
Any questions?
Thanks. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody,
Thank you,
for
sir.
being on board. Okay.
Okay, with that, our next meeting is scheduled for August the 2nd, which is 2 days before our comments should be back. So hopefully we can give you a recap of all the comments.
Pat, I have a question.
Bring your knapsack, because you'll be here through the night, I'm sure. And we'll see you on.
There's a question
I'm
on the
sorry?
table.
Yes, sir.
In regards to opt-in, opt-out, have you developed a timeline to present the board with opt-out solutions of what they look like from the RFI?
We will be doing that following the receipt of the final state plan, which should be, as we understand, in the September timeframe. We have 90 days, and so there'll be a full vetting at that point. Right now, we'll have something to compare against the two, and then we'll develop the recommendation to the director based on that.
Well, Pat, there was a question in the audience.
Go ahead. Question from the audience?
Not really a question, just a comment. This is Barb Lynn with AT&T. I was taken out of my local role and given to the state and OES for all public safety and FirstNet, including Indian Country, for representing AT&T and partnering with our FirstNet in the state. A couple of points that I wanted to make. First of all, the heavy lift that this team and OES has to make in this first 45 days is, we understand. We want to work with you very closely to make sure you feel like you have whatever you need during that 45 days and in the next 45 days to continue to work through that and beyond, like we had stated before. Addressing some of the questions about service, pricing, those types of things. This isn't new to AT&T. We've been in the business for over almost 140 years. So we will be able to be competitive. We can't have adoption without coverage and pricing that makes sense to public safety, right? So we'll continue to work with and make sure during these meetings that we are very engaged and involved, and we have as many of the questions answers as we possibly can. I've asked for outreach and information for areas that is critical to public safety. OES did send out information. I can take that data now and work with my RAN teams. They're very eager to get the information down to Latin longs. They love that kind of stuff. And I can work with the Indian Country now on specific geographical areas that they would like to see improved coverage and take that back. All of this is an evolution plan. The more information we have now, the more likely it will be able to be in the 45 days and beyond draft plan. So I wanted to offer that up. My email is bw1513@att&t.com. My number is 916-541-9962. So it is on record. Scott Andrews was not able to be here. He is our state SPOC. He's in Hawaii with their analysis right now. He will be back. I am local to California, and I'm at the beck and call of OES and all of you and all of the committees as well. So with that, I was kind of skipped in the AT&T/FirstNet presentation, so I wanted to make sure you had my information, where I fit in, and what I can do for you. And I will be at all of the meetings. We're already talking about off meetings, for your local jurisdictions that we can meet. I will be wherever I need to be in the state, wherever the planes will get me there fast enough to accommodate everybody during this time period. So that's all I want to say.
Okay, hearing nothing further from the board, this meeting's adjourned.